Hola. Buenas tardes. As you heard, my name is Kevin Richardson, and I've been involved in user experience for a long time. 25 years is a long time. And I have done user experience research, I've done design, and I've done management. Currently, I'm the Director of User Experience at Infragistics in the United States. If you need to contact me, you can reach me at krichardson@infragistics.com. I'm happy to respond to all emails that get sent to me. You can follow me on Twitter at KHR_UX. But what we're here to talk about today is really a story. All good presentations are really stories. And the story I want to tell you today is about why you should care about user experience. And to do that, we want to look at how technology begins as engineering events and hopefully evolves into something like a personal commodity, a personal device. Okay. This chart was created by a psychologist named Don Norman in 1998, and he used it to explain how hardware moves through its technology life cycle. I think technology life cycle is a bad name for it. Probably for software, we should consider it technology evolution. And what we're looking at here is how technology begins as something to meet a need that people have, right? I have something that I would like to be able to do, but I don't have the ability, so we create a piece of technology to do that. Even though that technology may be difficult to use, that technology, in fact, may be dangerous to use, but it's enough that we're willing to put up with it because it allows us to accomplish some goal, right? It allows us to do a thing that we either couldn't do before or perhaps couldn't do as well before. Over time, more features, more functionality gets added to this piece of technology, and at some point, it crosses the line over which we no longer really care about the technology. It already does all of the things we need it to do, right? What's important to us at that point is how easy it is for us to use, how easy it is for us to be able to accomplish this thing that we're trying to accomplish. And all of the new features and all of the new functionality really doesn't matter anymore. I want to look at a couple of examples of this. Cars are the first one. This is the Model T Ford. Ford created something like 15 million of these cars in the early 1900s at a time when the population of the United States was only 100 million. So lots of people were buying these things, and they made a whopping 22 horsepower. Speed demons on the road. And by all accounts, they were difficult to use, they were uncomfortable, and they were dangerous. And if you bought one, not only did you become a driver, which was a unique thing, but you also had to become your own mechanic and your own parts fabricator, because it wasn't like there was a dealership around the corner where you could just take it if something broke, right? If a wheel breaks or you get a hole in the radiator, you have to fix it yourself. And that's if you can figure out how to make a part for it. But it was enough, right? People bought these things because it was better than mature technology at the time, which was 1 horsepower, and it did what all of the wagons couldn't do. They took you farther, they took you faster. Since then, technology for cars has evolved. Now we have cars like the Bugatti, 1,000 horsepower, right? It is clearly no longer an engineering event because there's all sorts of technology in this car that for 99.9% of us, we don't care about. The fact that you can go 250 kilometers per hour, so what? Does it have cup holders? Yes, that's important to us. Does it have space for us to carry groceries from the market all the way home? Yes, that's important for us. All of the technology differences between this and a Ford Taurus or, whatever moderately priced car, not that we could afford Bugattis, but all of that technological improvement for all of us is a waste. We don't care, we can't use it, it's not important. Houses have been around even longer. Since the first time people wanted to get out of the rain and wandered into a cave, it was enough, right? It allowed you to stay slightly warmer, slightly drier than you would be if you were outside. And even if your house looked like this, where it was made kind of straw and it had some windows, maybe a door, it had a roof, maybe a fireplace, right? It was all of the technology that was necessary. Still an engineering event, for sure, certainly compared to a cave. And it was enough, right? It did what previous generations of housing couldn't do. Houses today are extraordinarily complex technological things. We've got central air conditioning, we have heating, ventilation, we have electricity, heated pools, we have double-pane, gas-filled windows, alarm systems. But all of this technology is not why we buy houses today. We buy houses today because, in part, maybe they're in good locations, in part because they reflect who we think we are, like the Bugatti. The people who buy the Bugatti, right, they buy that car because it reflects what they think of themselves or what they want you to think of them, not because they're interested in driving 250 kilometers an hour to the grocery store. Software is another engineering event. Early software particularly, right? It was initially difficult to use. You needed a different education than most people had. You had to have a certain degree of technical expertise. It was, especially for business software, form field driven. You typed stuff in, it printed stuff out, or it saved information in a database someplace. But it was easier and more efficient than the mature technology at the time, which was paper and typewriters, maybe carbon paper if you needed copies, and big file cabinets to store all of this stuff, right? It was worth the effort to go through the trouble of using early computer systems because it was better than what you had available to you. They haven't evolved much. If you saw the first one and you thought, oh yeah, that's cute, old software. I remember when software used to look like that. That was from 2014. That was CRM's latest, SAP's latest CRM product. Software hasn't seemed to evolve much. And one of the things I would like to talk about this afternoon is why that should be the case. Everything gets designed, whether it's a house or a car or a piece of software. Somebody decides the way it should look, the way it should work. The question is, why doesn't everything get designed well? And specifically with software, why do we somehow feel that software is better? Why should software be inherently different? In fact, it should be easier to design software well because it's not constrained by the physical world. Cars, you have to worry about manufacturing process, you have to worry about materials. Houses, the same thing. With physical labor, you need to worry about how big a thing can be before it falls down, right? All sorts of engineering concerns. Software has nothing to do with the physical world. If we wanted to make it look like a cloud, it could look like a cloud. If it needed to look like a shoe, it could look like a shoe. It doesn't matter. We decide how the design should look and how the users interact with it. But still, some reasons, software remains exempt from evolution. It's almost like the dinosaur that refuses to evolve into something else. I think there are 4 reasons for this. The first is that we believe that better software means lower price and more features. Right? Ask any software development company in the world how they're going to improve their software and make it more likely that people will buy it, and they will say, we will add more features, and we will lower the price. That makes software better. Everybody agrees. Sure, everybody agrees. Software is better. The second is that we adapt to the software and not the other way around. And this is an incredibly sad statement, that we believe it's okay for us to change our behavior to match the requirements of a piece of software. Since when did we do that was fine? Yet we do. We all agree, right? Software is difficult to use. Yeah, it's difficult to use. Well, what are you going to do about it? Well, we're going to go training. 1 week of training, 2 weeks of training, right? If software is hard to use, that's not really the software's fault. It's our fault. We believe this. It's absurd. Third, the cost of poor design comes later. For those of us involved in the software industry, right, we are at certain points in the development and design process there when decisions are made. We make the best decisions we can. We take our jobs very seriously. Complex software takes a long time, and it's the result of thousands and thousands of well-meaning decisions that people like you and I make every day in the constraints of the real world, time and budget. By the time software goes out into the world and somebody has to use it, you and I, we're long gone. We've moved on to other projects, maybe several other projects by that point, given how long business software typically takes to reach the real world. So if there's a problem, if people can't use it, or, God forbid, people aren't buying it, we're not there to blame. So it takes the responsibility away from us a little bit in a way that it probably shouldn't. And last, and this is the most horrible, horrible reason of all, I guarantee you, people say this phrase, "I am not good at computers." Can I see a show of hands, please, if anybody's parents or grandparents have ever asked you to help them figure out a computer problem? Yes. Why is this okay? If for no other reason than to leave you alone, you should be concerned about user experience. It's a terrible, terrible thing to believe fundamentally that I am the problem, not this piece of software. We would never stand for this if it was a house or a car. We would complain and they would change the design. Yet for software, we believe we are the problem. But luckily, there's a solution, and it's also us. Now, I want to spend the next few minutes talking about how we can solve this problem, because there is a solution. And user experience design is the process I want to discuss with you. And really, when I talk about user experience design, it is people that I'm talking about. In this profession, there are people like me who have degrees in cognitive psychology. There are people who are sociologists, anthropologists, graphic designers, right? none of these individuals until recently went to school to study a thing called user experience design or human-computer interaction. These are just recently academic areas of study. We all studied something else and came to this profession because we care about the experience people have with software. And when I say it is all of us who can be the solution, I include you as well. You are part of the solution to poor design, even though you may not necessarily, as software testers, be involved in upfront user research. You may not be involved in usability testing. But you are the very last line of defense for your parents and grandparents. So if you see something that looks like poor design, it is in your own best interest to say something to somebody, because personally, it's going to come back to bite you later. When your grandmother calls you and says, "How do I message on this phone?" If you don't care about the rest of the general public, you have to at least care about your family. But before I talk about what UX design is, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about what it is not. It is not going out and asking people what they want. When we talk about business software specifically, there are people whose jobs it is to go out and collect requirements. Typically, they're called business analysts. And their job is to go to all of the stakeholders and say, what is it that you want this software to be able to do? And they write it down in a very specific format, requirements format. But you can imagine it as a waiter taking an order in a restaurant. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. Okay. But it is not that, because people don't know what they need. And there's a difference between what you want and what you need. This is going to be one of two stories that I tell you this afternoon. In this story, I and my team were visiting a client in Texas, and we were talking about redesigning a trading application for their financial analysts. While the team was meeting, the man in charge took me around on a tour of the building, and he was showing me their technology and the people who were working, the traders. And they look like this. If you can see, this is the guy's head here. And he's got these monitors wrapped around his head. This guy has 10 monitors wrapped around his head. The people that I spoke to only had 4, but you get the idea. And they all look like this. If you can see it, they're all colors and lines, and things are blinking, and some stuff is big and some stuff isn't big. It is absolutely absurd. So he introduced me to best trader. Okay, got up, shook his hand. Hi, nice to meet you. And I thought, okay, here's my opportunity to find out what's going on, because nobody, and I mean no one, would voluntarily wrap themselves literally in this mess of stuff. So I said, what would you like to make your job easier? And I figured, at a minimum, he would say, just make it stop blinking. Because 8 hours a day, this is what this man looks at. And he didn't say that. And honest to God, this is what he said. I want a faster processor. I thought, okay. At this point, I kind of have a choice, right? We were there to redesign software, but I could just say, buy everybody a faster processor, we can pack up and go home, and I don't have to stay in Texas anymore. So I asked him, okay, why a faster processor? He said, because with a faster processor, I could run 2 more monitors. Absolutely serious. And when you step back and you think about it, like, what is this guy trying to do? Well, one of his tasks was to buy and sell financial products. And to do that, he was interested in the relative change in the value of, let's just call it, two different currencies, right? How are they trading relative to one another? In addition, he wanted to know the rate of change of that currency fluctuation. Was it trending positive? Was it trending negative? How quickly was it trending? And also, what was historically the rate of change at around this period of time, say last year, last 5 years, last 10 years? And he was looking for this information in order to do the mental math in his head to figure out whether or not he should buy or sell. These were all the factors he was concerned about. When he said, I need a faster processor, what he was really saying was, I need more information, more data on the screen so that I can make better decisions, right? He only knew what he knew, which was, give me more blinking graphs, and I will make sense of it. As a designer, what you hear when somebody tells you something like that is they need something that coordinates that information into a single picture so that at a glance, since we know what you're trying to do, we can show you the information you need rather than create 3 or 4 different components to go on these monitors, each of which may be very easy to use, but is a mess as a whole. Okay, so that was my one story. UX design is also, our job is not to make things look pretty, although oftentimes that's what people think we do. And I'm not saying that a piece of business software should not look professional, and there is certainly a lot that a good designer can do with the aesthetics, with the design language, to support the needs of the user in what they're trying to accomplish. But our job is not simply to paint a pretty interface. And finally, user experience design is not usability. And this is the one where even people who are in the field stop and ask me, but, you know, what? I thought it was usability, right? I thought the goal was to get some piece of software that's having problems, have it handed to people like me, we'll go out and test it and tell you how to fix it, right? That's usability. And I tell you, usability is not enough. So when somebody says, oh yeah, it's a usability problem. It may be a usability problem, but think about that guy trading with the monitors around his head. If we had given him 3 or 4 separate applications, one for each of those questions that he was asking, rather than a unified whole, each one of those things could have been very usable, right? This monitor has something very usable. This monitor has something very usable. This monitor has something very usable. The overall experience of this individual is not something that is very useful. Each piece may be usable, but the whole thing is not useful to me, no matter how usable each individual piece is. So when somebody says, yeah, it's a usability, usability is enough, right? Can't you guys just fix it in usability testing? The answer is no. No, we cannot. And in fact, if you're even asking this question, it means you know there are problems, and we are way too late in the process to start trying to fix little cubes in what should be one nice, beautiful wall of an experience. What usability does, to use a medical analogy, is treat the symptoms, not the disease. Something that's well designed is, by definition, usable. Something that's usable may not be useful, may not be well designed at all. And that's a key thing that folks don't typically understand. But that trader, he would understand it. He could have individual usable components, usable functions, but taken as a whole, it would still be so difficult to use, it would not be useful to him. And this is kind of what we're aiming at. We're aiming at something that is a unified experience that allows individuals to do the tasks they're trying to accomplish with a minimum of that mental math that they do today. And if we know what they're trying to accomplish, we can give it to them. UX design, then, is a process. It's a process whose only goal is to identify and solve problems. And in fact, it looks like this, right? Like any process, you could lay it out in a diagram. And like any process, you could make some parts smaller, some parts larger, right? We live in a real world with budgets and time constraints. We could take things out. Here's usability testing in the middle. We don't have time for usability testing. Well, we could take usability testing out. There are drawbacks to changing things. There are drawbacks to removing things from the process. For instance, if I don't test it, then what you get at the far end is our best guess as to what users will find useful and usable. It may be a very good guess. We may be very good at what we do, but if we've skipped the part where we put it in front of users and have them show us how they use it, it is still just a guess. The key takeaway here is that there are no shortcuts to good design. And that includes not just the work that I do professionally, but the work that you do as well. So, user experience design gives us things that are useful. It gives us things that are usable. But there is one more thing that most of the people that I talk to never think about, never care about, but should, and is directly relevant to work that you do. And that brings me to my second story. When my two sons, who are now 22 and 24, were younger, they were the perfect age when the Harry Potter books came out. We used to wait online at midnight at bookstores to get the latest Harry Potter book, which was like 800 pages long. And we would get home at 1 in the morning, and they would read it until the next morning. And by breakfast, the book was mine, which meant I could read it. But when the first book came out, it took a while before the first film came out. I think the first film came out around book 3 or so. And you can imagine what it was like in the house. Crazed. Like, oh my God, we have to go see the Harry Potter film. I'm like, yep, absolutely. I love these books. I am more than happy to go see the Harry Potter film. So, you know, now we have to go to the movie theater and wait on that line. And you have to buy 4 tickets and soda and popcorn and candy. And, you know, in US dollars, like $50 or something like that for all to go to the movie. And I admit, for the very first film, I thought it was great. It was amazing. The way they painted brought the book to life was amazing. And it lasted, whatever, an hour and a half, and it was very uplifting, and you walked out feeling great in the music. And we get outside, right? You walk outside the theater, and I have to know, right? What do my two sons think of the movie? Brian, Sam, what did you think? And I had to be looking like that. I'm like, what did you think? And they both looked at me, and they went, eh. And I thought, what? How could you not like this film? All right, now let's not even talk about the money that I now just spent for you to not like the movie, or the soda, the popcorn, and the candy. But why? Can you tell me, please, why didn't you like the movie? And they said, it didn't really match the way it looked in my head. And I had to think about that for a second. I'm like, you know, that's the reason why if you read the book and then go to the movie, chances are you're kind of disappointed with the movie because you've already had a movie going on in your head. They had already read, you know, 2,400 pages or so of Harry Potter at that point. In their minds, they had drawn pictures of what Hogwarts looked like and what Hagrid looked like, you know, and what Harry looked like, right? In the book, Harry looks like this little character up here, the skinny kid with the glasses and the foofy hair. I'm sorry about the translation, foofy, sticking up. And in the movie, he looks like this kid. Yeah, there are similarities, but they had already spent a lot of time imagining what it looked like, and it probably wouldn't have mattered. The movies were brilliant. They took great care to match the books as well as possible, but you probably can't match the imagination of, you know, a 10-year-old boy. So I wasted maybe $50 on a film, but this process happens in software development all the time in exactly the same fashion, and they spend more than $50 on coffee for the meeting. The other thing that design does is it lowers development risk. Remember what I talked about before about how requirements are typically gathered for software design, for software development projects, right? You get this person who goes out and collects requirements, the business analyst. And their job is to create this enormous book of requirements. And then they sit down with all the people they interviewed, and they say, here's the stuff you told me. Are these all of your requirements? Yep, yep, yep. They all your requirements? Yes, yes, yes. These all yours? Uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. Okay, good. We have this book. Everybody agrees that what we want is written down in this book. Yes? Yes. Now we give it to the development team, and we wait. This red line is my depiction of risk, so take it with a grain of salt. But for waterfall process, we start with our requirements, and the development team is given the unfair job of trying to design screens that match the verbal descriptions in this requirements document and come up with something useful. And like I mentioned before, these are professionals. They are doing the best they can. They are making good decisions within the constraints of the process that they work in. And at the end, they have some alpha release, and all the people who gave requirements now come back into the room. It's been, 6, 12, 18 months later. Everybody comes in, and you have this big book. Say, remember the big book? Yeah, my stuff is in the book. Yes, we built you software that is this book. And they roll in the monitor, and they take the cloth, and they go, ta-da! And everybody who gave their requirements looks at this and goes, eh. And the development team, who has now spent, maybe a year and a half of their lives pouring into this thing, says, what do you mean, eh? This software does everything you ask me to do. Point to a page, this paragraph, this line. It does that, right? Here it is. Boom, 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 boom. It does that. Why don't you like it? And they go, it doesn't really match what I thought it was going to look like. But we were never told what you thought it was going to look like, right? It does all the stuff you asked for. It just doesn't do it in the way you expected. Maybe it's easy to use, maybe it's not, maybe it's a good piece of software, maybe it isn't. But the thing is, the risk to this thing has been increasing since the very first requirement was gathered. So, all right, maybe it's a software development issue. Maybe it's waterfall. Waterfall is bad. All right, so what's good? Well, let's do agile. Agile is supposed to fix this. It is supposed to lower this risk, and it lowers the risk by having individual sprints. So we don't do all the requirements gathering up front. We do little requirements gathering at sprint 1. We build, we design, we build. Sprint 2, requirements, design, build. Sprint 3, right? And yes, it does lower the slope of the line, so there is nominally less risk here. But still, we don't know what the movie looks like until the great unveiling at the end, because we're only seeing the results of individual sprints. We don't know what the piece of software is going to look like until it's finished. Sprints, waterfall, it doesn't matter. So this one doesn't help either. And what I would suggest is that the process of product design, which is really what user experience design is doing, is the way to approach software development in general. It doesn't matter if your company wants to do waterfall, your company wants to do agile, or some variant of agile. The user experience design process needs to happen up front. And what we do lowers risk to its absolute minimum, because we go out and not understand what users say they want, but also observe what they need. From that set of requirements, we can coordinate with what the business wants, what the technology constraints are, and build fast, inexpensive prototypes that show you what the end result of this piece of software is going to look like. Not only that, but we can put it in front of people and say, if your task was X, show me how you would do it. And just like sitting in front of a final product, they can show me how they would do it, where they would be confused, and allow us to go back and make changes to this thing in a very quick and inexpensive fashion, so that by the time we're finished with design, we all agree not only what the requirements are, but how those requirements will be visualized in this artifact. And only at that point do we start coding. And at that point, the lives of the development team is so much nicer, because they don't have to worry about designing something. They know that they don't have to be held responsible if the end product is difficult to use or people don't buy it. We've already shown that these problems are taken care of. All that has to get done now is code. And I even know what it looks like, right? I have CSS, I have design specification documents. This is all finished. But I want to bring back the point that it is not simply people like me who does this job. All of us are responsible for user experience. You can think in a very abstract way, business software, right? I want to make it easier for people. I want to make my company more successful, more profitable, maybe get a promotion for myself. All of that is fine. All of that is true. But when you're doing your job, think about your grandmother. Because if she was going to sit down and try and use this thing, which you are touching and in some way responsible for if you don't say anything, then when she calls you, it's your fault. Thank you very much.